Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel. To Why Wasn't It Better? I am your host, Patrick Darms.
And I'm your co-host, Anton Paras.
We have a return guest, Nathan Perry.
Pleasure to be here, guys, and pleasure to talk about the movie that we've got today. I'm happy for a return to Christmas. I remember last year was a good experience.
That's right. Yeah, we had you on for Home Alone 2, Lost in New York.
Yeah.
Well, since this is the second year in a row that you're joining us for a Christmas film, we're going to have to make it a tradition.
I remember we recorded around the same time last year before, Nathan, you were newlywed. So just wanted to say congrats on almost 1 year married.
And in fact, 1 year married by the time this episode comes out. So that's a treat for sure. Thank you very much.
I didn't congratulate you on the actual anniversary, so you can retract that.
Okay, got it.
That'll come later.
Got it. Okay. We'll record that at a different time. Cool.
Just for the record, I'm not editing any of this.
Great.
You should.
This is all going to be in there.
This is what the people come for. Like, yeah. I know we review movies and stuff, but like this is the real thing people are here for.
Yeah. The real meaning of Christmas.
Yeah. Did you know that Lorne Michaels was in an open dead marriage?
I'm sorry that I don't understand that reference, but
it's an actual thing.
What does that mean?
They got married, but just were not intimate and ended up making it open. But they were still married for like the first 5 years of their marriage, Lorne Michaels and then wife. And it was well known on the cast and behind the scenes of SNL, and Dan Aykroyd even dated Lorne Michaels' wife.
Wow.
Okay.
Huh. Okay.
I'm not really sure why this is coming in context of like what we're doing, but okay.
I may edit this now.
Okay, see, I was testing the waters.
Yeah, were you trying to deliberately mess this up?
I was testing the waters.
Okay, all right. Wonderful. Should we just start over?
No, we can continue. I think we did the intro.
We did.
And we have Nathan in the house. We're recording a fun Christmas film today.
Is it a Christmas classic? Would you classify it as that?
Yeah, of course.
I can't tell if you're being sarcastic or not. The cameras are off.
Okay, I'm trying to be as sincere as I can. I think after giving it a watch a couple times and knowing the importance of the book as well to a lot of children's hearts over the years, I think that this gets its own spot in Christmas classics. But we're going to talk about all that, aren't we?
You're talking to one of those children, my friend.
Well, if that hasn't gotten people excited about what we're going to be talking about today, should we go ahead and quit teasing?
We should. The film that we are discussing today is The Polar Express. By happy coincidence, Christmas just happens to fall on a Wednesday this year, which is our usual release day of the week. And, typically, Anton, we have avoided releasing episodes on holidays just for the obvious reason that a lot of people are too busy to listen to podcasts on major holidays. But this will be released on Christmas Day.
Yes, and it's up to our listeners to decide after we've talked about things. Is this the Polar Express or the Polarizing Express?
It's both. This is a very polarizing film. And I didn't even realize that until doing the research for this podcast, for this episode, I should say.
If it wasn't polarizing, did you think it was just negative before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say so. We'll get into it. Well, I think we can intro this then.
Please.
Tom Hanks and director Robert Zemeckis reunite for The Polar Express, an aspiring adventure based on the beloved children's book by Chris Van Allsburg. When a doubting young boy takes an extraordinary train ride to the North Pole, he embarks on a journey of self-discovery that shows him the wonder of life never fades for those who believe. The Polar Express was released on November 10th, 2004 by Castle Rock Entertainment, Shangri-La Entertainment, Playtone, Image Movers, Golden Mean Productions, and Warner Brothers Pictures. Directed by Robert Zemeckis, screenplay by William Broyles Jr. and Robert Zemeckis, based on the book by Chris Van Allsburg, starring Tom Hanks, Daryl Sabara, Nona Gay, Jimmy Bennett, Eddie Deason, and Michael Jeter. The budget, $170 million. That is $283 million adjusted for inflation. The box office was $318 million. That is $529 million adjusted for inflation. Anton, why was this movie chosen? Other than the fact that it is a Christmas movie and we're releasing this on Christmas.
Well, of course it's the holidays. Of course it's the Christmas times. And what else are we going to think about? But of course, the nostalgia that the holidays brings to us. And this is tied to one of the most popular, most beloved children books of all time. Is that right?
It is. The book was published in 1985. It very quickly became a instant Christmas classic, especially for kids of our generation. You know, we're all three of us here are millennials. I read this as a kid. And of course, I was familiar with Van Allsburg's other work, right? I would say The Polar Express may not even be his most famous work. It's probably Jumanji. Do a lot of people realize that the Jumanji movie was based on a book? I guess so.
Based on the book Jumanji?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a kid's
Okay.
book. Yeah.
Okay. So I read this as a kid. I enjoyed it. By the time this film adaptation came around in 2004, I was obviously much older than the target demographic, but I had been so fond of the book as a little kid. I was excited for this. Tom Hanks, Robert Zemeckis, sounded good on paper. Tom Hanks, at the time in 2004, and he still very much is, one of the most famous actors in Hollywood. Getting into it a bit more, Robert Zemeckis, I think, would both of you agree with me? He was more of a household name then than he might be now.
It was definitely part of his heyday, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Heyday's the right word.
I would say that he didn't have any or nearly as much misses on his list, right, of films, right? So even if you weren't always thinking Zemeckis, certainly he as a director, as someone especially in Hollywood of who do you want for something, he seems like a sure bet as well, right?
In 2004, oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would describe him as the most successful acolyte of Steven Spielberg there is.
Who else is part of the Steven Spielberg tree that you want to give a shout out to?
Maybe Joe Johnson.
Joe Johnson, great one.
Yeah. Sort of J.J. Abrams.
Isn't J.J. Abrams just a super fan?
In a way.
If you watch Super 8, that definitely felt like it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I'm also going to throw a name on the list that you probably wouldn't think is an acolyte of Spielberg, but he kind of is, and he would admit this himself. Sam Mendes.
I did not realize.
Yes. American Beauty does not happen without Steven Spielberg behind the scenes. At least the American Beauty that we got. Most people don't know that. Spielberg had a lot to do with the influence of Mendes directing that film. Could do a whole podcast on that. Anton, this is all I'm getting this all from that DreamWorks book that I talk about all the time. It's pretty cool.
It's amazing to see the great influence that Spielberg has on Hollywood and all these directors. And this, with that, the great influence on making a complete film and also putting their personal touches. And Zemeckis, when you look at his body of work, really knows how to put together a film.
I almost want to say he's underrated at this point because he had gotten his start in the late 70s and early 80s. And I'm not going to talk about his first couple films. I've never seen them. I don't know much about them. But prior to The Polar Express, this is the work that Zemeckis put out in a row. Romancing the Stone, Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Back to the Future Part 2, Back to the Future Part 3, Death Becomes Her, Forrest Gump, Contact, What Lies Beneath, Castaway.
Not a slouch of a list.
No.
Not at all. You could maybe argue there's two slight misses in there, Death Becomes Her and Contact.
But man,
Yeah.
I've said before, Back to the Future to me is like a perfect film.
Completely agree.
And
Who Framed
Forrest Gump.
Roger Rabbit is a perfect film.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit is incredible, and then Forrest Gump, like you couldn't grow up in the 90s if you didn't know Forrest Gump, right?
Yeah.
He won an Oscar for Forrest Gump. That won Best Picture, and he got Best Director for it. Point is, going into this film, Polar Express, that is about as impressive a body of work as it gets for a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't love all those films, like, I'll admit it, I don't really care for Death Becomes Her. It's I haven't seen it in a long time. It's whatever to me. Contact is a movie that we're going to be covering.
Both make a good amount of money, though.
They did, yes.
Yeah.
They were successful films financially. Some of those were massive films. Like the Back to the Future movies were massive.
Sure.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit was massive. Forrest Gump was not just a critical hit, but I mean, it made, I think it made like $600 million in 1994,
Wow.
something like that. Point is, he was on a heater. He gets a huge budget for this film.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out to be a major turning point in his career. Things were never quite the same for Zemeckis going forward after this. He sort of got lost in this mocap land. After this, he did 2 more motion capture films, Beowulf, which I like, but a lot of people don't. That didn't do well financially. And the Jim Carrey version of A Christmas Carol, which didn't really do well either.
Mm.
And I didn't even realize this. Recently, he did a mocap version of Pinocchio with Tom Hanks, which was a total disaster.
Yep, live action Disney.
Did you see it?
I did. I didn't like it.
I was going to say, how was that?
Not good.
We're here to talk about the Polar Express, of course. Nathan, you had not seen this before, but why did you agree to appear on this episode when I asked you?
Because I like you guys.
Oh.
Thank you. And it seemed like, I had never read The Polar Express, had never seen the film. I only knew the dialogue around its uncanny valleyness, right? And its visual design. And just given that, I thought, who better to talk about such a thing and see how's it holding up? 20 years later. Can you believe that this is a 20-year-old movie?
It's hard to believe, but yeah.
Right? It's hard to think that it's that long ago, but in some ways, it's a film that has some things that I was we'll save more details for later, but I wasn't it was an interesting film to watch. Maybe we'll leave it at that.
It is. I understand.
I think definitely interesting as like a point in cinema development history, right? Unique in some ways, in a lot of ways. So, yes, but can't say that I was like, I always wanted to see the Polar Express, but thought it would be a fun thing to watch here now later in life to bring a different perspective to. So,
I saw this film in the theater when it came out, and this is something that I'll just say it now. This was absolutely amazing to see in IMAX 3D in 2004.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that mean that the film holds up 20 years later? I'm not sure. We'll talk about it throughout this episode, but I just wanted to say that now, that when this came out in 2004 and I went to see it with my family, 3D IMAX was not really a thing then. Doing the research for this episode, this was the first movie to do that. 3D IMAX movies are a dime a dozen now.
Right.
Now, that does not make the film good or bad, right? But I think my assessment of this film is going to be a little bit colored by my experience seeing this in the theater. So just full disclosure there. Anton, this film is hated by a lot of people.
Polarizing, you'd say?
It's the right word for it. I didn't love it when I first saw it. I liked it. I was like, wow, I mean, I liked the book as a kid. Seems like a pretty good adaptation of it, plus a few extras, which we'll talk about. It's
a beloved book, so any adaptation will face scrutiny, no matter what. Anything that's an adaptation that's beloved.
Anton, what is your history with this book and or film?
So I do remember this book as a child, and being read this book as a youngin in the 90s. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say I grew up with it. I think it was something I was fond of. It wasn't a favorite, so I wasn't clamoring to see this film in theaters. I didn't see this movie until I was in college, and at the time it was to embrace the memes of what I was hearing about the effects of this film and of the animation. I walked away more pleasantly surprised, but I do know, as you said, this is a very polarizing film. It's one that has a lot of discussion around it.
Yeah. There's plenty of people that love this film, and it is lambasted by others. Kind of like a film that we covered last Christmas, The Grinch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beloved source material, a much more successful adaptation, I think, financially than The Polar Express. Like, The Grinch is one of those movies, I'd say most people we know have seen The Grinch.
Yeah.
Polar Express, just a sidebar, the symphony orchestra here in Charlotte, they performed this last year, and I'm pretty mad at myself for not getting tickets because this would have been really cool to see with a live orchestra.
Yeah, we'll talk about it a bit, but this is just a very cozy film when it comes down to it.
That's a great word.
And I think like that, and the experience of being on the train, that is what really draws people in because of that atmosphere. And man, shouts out, Zemeckis knows how to make a cozy film.
It's a really good point, a really good word. There's something to be said for emotions that a film makes you feel when you're watching it.
Before we dive into the production history, do we have any other shout outs to beloved books or just even, let's stick with books, beloved books from the 90s, either Nathan or Pat?
From the 90s?
90s? Why 9? I mean, Polar Express is 85, 80 or 86.
But we definitely more so like consumed it in the 90s, right? At least I'm speaking for myself.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I was, yes.
I mean,
yes.
I wasn't alive in the 80s, so yes.
I was barely alive in the 80s, so yes. I mean, I feel like you're limiting me here. I mean, my immediate answer is obviously going to be Harry Potter.
Yep, it's a great one.
Sure.
I'm going to throw some John Grisham at you. I'm going to throw some Tom Clancy at you.
I love to think of 6-year-old Pat reading John Grisham.
I'm thinking because I think the question is, what books from the 90s did you read in the 90s? And I don't know. We're reading a lot of Tom Clancy.
I was leaning more towards like Animorphs or.
Yeah, I was that weirdo. I was reading Tom Clancy at 10 years old.
Nice, cool. I mean,
I read John Grisham at that age too. I think I read The Firm right around then because I had seen the movie.
Yeah, no, I was kind of thinking like, around 98, 99, I was super into scary stories to read in the dark.
I just completely ruined your question, didn't I?
No, I think this is awesome. And I think like anything like this.
I'm sorry, Anton. I can tell you wanted different answers.
No, this is awesome. Like genuinely. Nathan, what about you? Anything comes to mind of beloved?
Do the books need to be from the 90s or just books I read in the 90s?
Read in the 90s. They were read to you in the 90s. They give you fun memories.
Like Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's not from the 90s, but especially as we're talking about Christmas kind of theme, that's one book that literally has Santa Claus in it.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, Nathan?
Sure.
You just booked yourself for next year's Christmas episode because it's the 20th anniversary of Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh man, there we go. All right, I guess I'm on.
That's done.
I'm not Team Edmund.
Who is
Edmund? Who is Team Edmund?
Look, Edmund's a real punk bitch.
Just gave up his family and all the Lion's allies for some Turkish delight.
He's lucky he survived that story. That's all I can say. Turkish delight. Great shout. Production history of The Polar Express. After reading the book to his children in 1999, Tom Hanks acquired the film rights. He optioned it with the hopes of playing the conductor and Santa Claus. Chris Van Allsburg had been unwilling to sell the rights to the book for a film adaptation, but he changed his mind after learning of Hank's involvement. One of the conditions of the sale was that the resulting film not be animated, as Van Allsburg feared this would not accurately represent his characters. Castle Rock Entertainment subsequently made a, quote, 7-figure commitment to co-produce the film with Hanks's company Playtone in early 2000. Rob Reiner was originally hired as director, and the film was originally scheduled to be released in December of 2001. After several delays, Robert Zemeckis took over in early 2002. He and writer William Broyles Jr. subsequently rewrote the screenplay. Their new draft expanded the roles of minor characters such as the hero girl, know-it-all, and lonely boy, aka Billy, aka Tiny Tim. It also added the new character of Hobo, or Gobo, as we like to call him, Anton, because he might be a ghost, he might be a hobo, we're not sure.
It's our endearing name for him, the Gobo.
The Gobo. The idea of a Scrooge puppet was conceived when Zemeckis looked at his childhood toys, one of which was a puppet. Great inspiration. After Zemeckis' company Image Movers contract with DreamWorks expired, he made a new deal with Warner Brothers to fund, distribute, and provide studio space. Anton, I have a sidebar for you.
Mm-hmm.
The production history is very kind to this moment. DreamWorks kicked him out. They fired him.
Yeah, jeez.
They wanted nothing to do with Image Movers. So his contract, quote unquote, expired, but whatever. Yeah, I referenced that before in the book, The Men Who Would Be King, that I keep bringing up. It dedicates an entire chapter to detailing just how annoyed the studio executives were with Zemeckis, who they always felt was too slow to develop anything.
Ruthless over at DreamWorks, huh?
Well, they were playing with a lot of other people's money. So everything they did was on a clock.
Yep, so then it became Shrek or nothing else.
Pretty much. I mean, Shrek really saved them, as you would imagine. Despite Van Allsburg's original condition, Zemeckis felt that a live-action version was unfeasible, claiming that it would look awful and it would be impossible and it would cost $1 billion instead of $160 million. He also felt that such a version would rob the audience of the art style of the book, which he felt, quote, so much a part of the emotion to the story, which he felt was, quote, so much a part of the emotion to the story, end quote. However, Zemeckis agreed that traditional animation would not work, so a new process was created by which actors would be filmed with motion capture equipment in a black box stage, which would then be animated to make the resulting film. All right, you take over.
Okay. So I'm right around the locomotive.
The decision to film in motion capture.
Yes. The decision to film in motion capture required another studio to co-produce, as the process was expensive and it cost $1 million per minute of footage. After Universal passed on the project, investor Steve Bing agreed to finance half the film's budget through his company Shangri-La Entertainment. The film is listed in the 2006 Guinness Book of World Records as the, quote, first all-digital capture, end quote, film, where all acted parts were done in digital capture. Hanks plays 5 roles in the film, including that of a small child, whose voice would later be dubbed in by Daryl Sabara. Zemeckis originally wanted him to play every role, but after trying this, Hanks grew exhausted, and they reduced the number. The locomotive featured in the film is an American 284 Berkshire type steam locomotive Berkshire type steam locomotive modeled after the Paris Marquette 1225, which had spent many years on a static display near Spartan Stadium in East Lansing, Michigan, on the campus of Michigan State University, where Chris Van Allsburg recalled playing on the engine when attending football games as a child. Michigan State University is also the home of the three-time world champion Draymond Green. Probably gonna cut that out. The buildings at the North Pole in the film represent an earlier era in American railroading. Building design drew inspiration from the Pullman neighborhood in Chicago, home of a railroad car manufacturer, the Pullman Company. Principal photography of the motion capture sequences began in June 2003 at Warner Brothers. In June 2003 at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank and finished in May 2004. The only 2 characters in the film to not be animated through motion capture were Smokey and Steamer, mainly because of the huge size discrepancy and their more caricature nature compared to the rest of the cast. Ultimately, the characters were animated traditionally with skeletal animation rigs. The film was Michael Jeter's last film performance, as he died on March 30th, 2003, before he could complete his voiceover work as Smokey and Steamer. His dialogue was redubbed by another actor. Most of Alan Silvestri's orchestral score featured in the film was not released on the soundtrack and never has been released. The soundtrack mostly comprises only songs featured in the film. Various bootlegs exist on the internet. There is, of course, a video game tie-in. Fun fact, you can get a copy of this game on the GameCube for about $15. The rarest copy of this game is also on the GameCube, sealed at $80 right now on eBay. With a budget of $170 million, it was the most expensive animated film ever made at the time of its release in 2004. The first feature length to be released in both 35mm and IMAX 3D. Despite being based on a beloved Christmas classic, it didn't do so hot at the box office. The film was divisive with critics. It was a mediocre 56% Rotten Tomatoes score. The film has also spawned multiple real-world holiday train travel experiences based loosely on the film's train journey all over the United States, as well as Canada and the UK. And that is our production history for the Polar Express.
Before we get into the discussion, we are going to take a brief break as we hear from a sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Sprizzy. Looking to skyrocket your YouTube channel's growth? Meet Sprizzy, your video's ultimate matchmaker. Their tailored ad campaigns connect your content with viewers who are already looking for videos like yours. With Sprizzy, you're not just getting views, you're gaining subscribers who are genuinely interested in what you create. Are you ready to boost your reach? Visit Sprizzy.com today and let's launch your channel to new heights. Sprizzy, the smarter way to promote your YouTube channel.
So
Okay.
now we're going to the reasons. We're back from our break.
Number one reason why this movie wasn't better, the uncanny valley, which is the production, right? This is either a beloved Christmas classic or it's 100% creepy. Nothing in between, no middle ground. I'm kidding, of course. There's some subtlety here, but there is no getting around it. One of the most talked about things with this movie is whenever anyone mentions this film, someone will inevitably bring up the uncanny valley. Your thoughts?
I mean, obviously, because it looks kind of odd, especially at times, right? You see any of them open their mouths and you're like, I don't need to see that.
Yeah.
I was watching this last night on an iPad with like great resolution, so the screen was really close to my face, and it's inconsistent.
I feel like a lot of the movement that you see, part of the uncanny valley is that things are a little bit too close to reality, right? But then there are going to be twinges that kind of make it look either too unrealistic or away from what we expect natural movement to be. And I see a lot of that, like either arm movements look a little jittery or head movements looking a little unnatural. You talked about the open mouths, Nathan, and that really is an interesting aspect of the film. Another, I think, is also the weightlessness of some scenes. It just doesn't look natural.
I'm sure we'll probably touch on it again, but one of the things that just watching this, again, I had never seen this movie before. I had not even really seen any, certainly never even seen like a short on YouTube, or even had seen really pictures. And watching it here in 2024, I was like, oh, this feels just like a really long PS3 cutscene.
That's fair.
Not a good one like Uncharted.
In some ways, I was feeling like, oh, I'm watching like an Uncharted or like Last of Us quality cutscene in terms of the visual ability. Because I think in some ways it felt kind of on par with that. And, in all fairness, those were games that came out then, like 10 years later. So this is ahead of the time in that way. Just cost 178 million or whatever to make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
But I think that adds to your point, Anton, of like things feeling some weightlessness, things that you kind of will see in like a video game cutscene that you kind of have more of a suspension of disbelief because it's a video game and you're going to get into a scene in 2 minutes of shooting guys. Like that's not Polar Express, and it feels weirder, right?
Yeah. I think also part of it is we're still in the early days of this. This is one of those pioneers of full-on animation that once you add the photorealism, you're gonna get a bit more Frankenstein than you'd like.
The dead eyes, the frozen faces, the plastic skin.
I still get the incomplete or just the mouths. Just is what gets me. But all of those.
But is it better?
But
is it any of it better than The Rock and The Mummy Returns? Yeah, we're good.
Way better. Way better. Whatever reason, the stuff that I found creepy in this film was probably not the stuff that you were initially thinking of. By far, the weirdest thing to me was the elves, because their voices were all sort of variations on like Joe Pesci.
Yeah.
It didn't bother me in 2004. I didn't think about it then when I first saw it, but like watching it now, I'm like, why do they all sound like they're from North Jersey?
Yeah, I think the most terrifying thing for me was Glasses Kid,
who is obviously voiced by an adult.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's like you can tell watching it now that the voice of the actor doesn't even match the character. It's like, had they gotten a real kid to do it, I think it would have been more forgivable.
I remember, I think, chatting with you about this earlier, Pat, or like about the glasses kid. And I know for me, I was like, I don't mind this too much. But I think because also in my head, I was like, and I'm also not going to watch this movie again for a very, very, very long time. So I'm okay with it just being that, and I don't need to think about it again.
In some ways, I envy you. In some ways, I don't, because this is a movie that is aimed towards kids. I look forward to watching this with my kids. I watch this with kids. My wife's family is staying with us, and we have very young nieces and nephews that I watch this with. They ate it up.
Yeah, and like just wanted to give a shout out the voice actor for Glasses Kid, Eddie Deason. He's well-renowned voice actor. He played Mandark on Dexter's Laboratory. He was on you name whatever 90s cartoon, he was on it. Recess, Pepper Ann, a lot of Disney stuff, SpongeBob. So I think he's in the arena of voice acting that would be recognized by kids. But I think just to kind of go back to the animation, a little off-putting.
Right.
Do you know what I found the most off-putting? Steven Tyler as the elf singer.
Is it just too over the top?
I don't even know. Like, how did this happen? Was he a fan of the book?
Well, you see, if you remember, this is a deep cut. Tom Hanks was in that film, That Thing You Do with Steve Zahn. Do you remember that one?
Tom Hanks directed it.
Yep. And in that film, he cast a very young Liv Tyler. This was her opening film in Hollywood. So Steven Tyler owed Tom Hanks a favor. And that's why Steven Tyler was in this film.
This was Tom Hanks catching in saying, I need you to do something for me.
I think that's the Christmas miracle that I want to hope for.
I was going to say the animation hasn't aged well, but that would be inaccurate because it didn't age at the time. It was the animation was criticized at the time of release in 2004.
Sure. Yeah, that's what I remembered from it being talked about at that time was, this.
Even I remember thinking it looked weird at the time, a little weird at the time. And the best technical explanation I could find for this is that, so they did all the footage motion capture, which, by the way, did either of you watch the making of footage online?
Yeah, I did.
It's pretty interesting. So, but I think the thing about this film that doesn't look amazing is that they mostly kept the footage raw and they didn't touch it up too much with animation. Like if you're thinking about something like Gollum, Andy Serkis's performance in Lord of the Rings, that was obviously motion capture. But even 20 plus years on, it doesn't have the same effect that I think what you see in this film does.
I think Gollum was enough of a soulless creature that we couldn't really recognize its humanity, therefore didn't feel the fear of Uncanny Valley.
Well, they were doing a lot of heavy lifting with the CGI with his character. Motion capture footage, when you're filming it raw, it's not really usable. You have to really clean it up, and I don't know that they did here.
Yeah, and you can only do so much if the film is fully computer generated, in which case you have a bit of a timeline and a crunch, so you're gonna make some exceptions.
Right. And clearly money was not the issue here because this movie cost
money.
Yeah, they had the money for it. It's just Zemeckis was into this motion capture stuff. It's a very curious obsession that he had. After making this movie, he said that he couldn't wait to do it more, and he certainly did. He doubled down. We mentioned this earlier. He did Beowulf. He did A Christmas Carol. Neither of those films did well. And actually, this got his production company shut down. Image Movers is his company. It got shut down because of the failures of these mocap films. The nail in the coffin for him was a film called Mars Needs Moms.
Yep, 2011 Disney film that tanked.
It lost $130 million for Disney.
It was also a book adaptation.
Big fan, Anton?
Mars Needs Moms is an underrated novel, yes.
Do you know what his next project was going to be? I'm talking about Zemeckis.
If You Give a Mouse a Cookie.
That would be... Is there an adaptation of If You Give a Mouse a Cookie?
Just an animated series. No full film.
His full film that was going to be next was a mocap remake of Yellow Submarine.
That would have been pretty cool.
I'm intrigued. I don't know if it would have been good. Have either of you seen the 10-second test footage that he made for
Nope.
this?
I have not.
Oh, you need to. It is all four Beatles in their yellow submarine regalia, and it has a very awkward pseudo John Lennon saying, "You know what would make us feel better? Singing." I'm not making this up. You can find it on YouTube. It's literally just a 10-second clip. And Disney, having looked at the box office record of his mocap stuff, they were like, "No thanks."
Right.
They pulled the plug.
Sure.
Back to the budget of this. Do you have a reaction to that, Anton?
No, I'm scared.
Back to the budget of Polar Express, $170 million. It's kind of shocking. It's like Avengers level money in today's
Yeah,
money.
that is a lot to think about for this.
I'm telling you, at the time, this would have been one of the most expensive movies ever made. It was the most expensive animated movie ever made at the time.
And it's like, it's interesting. I'm like, why this movie? Did it get a lot of money because Zemeckis had that weight that we talked about earlier of like just being so successful that he could sort of be like, well, I got you guys in at like 50 million, but we need more or something to get the project done. I don't.
It was all of the above. It was what you're saying, and it was the fact that something like this had just never been done before. So they were sort of inventing the technology on the spot. It really ended up costing about $1 million a minute, what you see on screen, which is pretty laughable 20 years later, but
yeah,
I think
it is what it is.
I think, and I think also going back, like Zemeckis being like obsessed with mocap, I think just is something you hear for someone like George Lucas as well at different points, just obsessed with like, I need to make this technology thing work. Right? This is my vision. This is where I think this piece of technology that's going to enhance or improve filmmaking and allow me to fulfill a vision of filmmaking. And, Zemeckis, Lucas are guys who are successful and originally, but are just really tightly wound on like, this is what needs to happen. This is what I need to push on.
According to him, if he had tried to do the Polar Express live action, it would have cost $1 billion. I don't understand how.
That sounds like one of those things that you say because you're like,
it would have cost like
$1 billion.
Yeah.
Like, this is the way to do it. Otherwise, it'd be.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do it mocap.
What's a banana, Michael? $5?
What does one do with a single orange? Buy it for $10? There's no way this film would have cost $1 billion live action.
No.
I think he just very clearly wanted to do motion capture, and he wasn't taking no for an answer.
Absolutely.
Just like our boy George. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Yeah, I don't see any reason you couldn't have done this live action, right? I mean, there's nothing.
They made Dune for $200 million. Dune, which was, other than maybe Lord of the Rings, Dune was seen as the most quote-unquote unfilmable source material. It's like, okay. Polar Express, you could do it.
Well, again, I think you're right. This is him definitely wanting to just put forward his vision for technology and filmmaking. So
it sort of, in a way, reminds me of what Cameron would do with Avatar and the Avatar sequel, where it's like, okay, the story is very much going to take a backseat here. This is a $200 million tech demo. Anton agrees. I can tell he's satisfied with that statement.
No, it's just, I feel like
it's a tech demo.
If you look at the comparisons to Final Fantasy and the Spirits Within, I do think that at least this usage, very similarly, it's being able to show off the technology and all its imperfections, but also its achievements.
And that's the thing. I'm glad you said that, Anton, because I do want to give Zemeckis credit for pushing the envelope on this stuff. He was the first filmmaker to do it. Now, you could make the case he had the money because of the reputation that he had, so no one else could have done this but him. I still think he deserves credit for it. It didn't translate perfectly in the finished product, right? But I think they were on the right track, because if you watch some of the making of footage, Tom Hanks's acting is great. He's doing all these different characters. Now, we can talk about him doing a bunch of different characters. Was that a good idea or a bad idea? But his acting is exactly what you would want from Tom Hanks. And if that didn't translate into the finished product, they at least tried.
They definitely had some interesting pieces, and having Tom Hanks on anything is a good thing to have, right? But yeah, it definitely feels a lot maybe suffers from just doing too much new stuff. But the hard bit is like, how do you not push the envelope without really putting in money and having something to pull it forward? I don't know. It's just that's one of the things thinking and watching this movie is like, how do you what would you do with this movie if you were still wanting to do mocap and do some animation but change it, right?
Right.
It's like I think you kind of get.
You can't
Yeah.
do everything. I'm going to talk about stuff now that I will defend this
Okay.
film for. Look, the uncanny valley criticism of this film, it's valid. A lot of the characters look awkward. Their dialogue looks awkward. Their movements look awkward. What did I write down in the notes? When some of the characters are moving, Anton, you touched on like the weightlessness of it. Some of it, like, what's the poor kid's name? Billy? Tiny Tim? The Tiny Tim fill in? There's some scenes where he's running and it looks like the puppets from Team America. Like it
Hmm.
looks awful, but there's some really great animation in this movie that deserves to be talked about. All of the backgrounds and production design and creativity that you see in maybe like the non-human stuff, I think looks awesome. I love the idealized like Norman Rockwell style they went for. Everything in the North Pole Village, everything in Santa's compound. I think that looks awesome. The locomotive looks awesome. All the
Yeah.
environments I think are spectacular. All the nature stuff, the northern lights, the animals, the mountains.
Yeah, I think as long as you don't have
I
people.
think that looked 20 years later, I think that holds up really, really well.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you look at the majority of the atmosphere, we talked about at the beginning of the episode, it's captures the aesthetic of the book perfectly in being able to build a universe that is cozy
Hmm.
but also feels full and lively. I feel like
Yeah.
it's amazing to kind of see that environment, and I really do agree with you, Pat. It just looks gorgeous. I think that when you add that to the music and kind of thinking about that aesthetic of like a holiday, Christmas train ride, this film really hit that on the head like fantastically. It's just this aspect of, well, then how do we throw people into it that feels like stylistically it teetered between a little too realistic versus also trying to be cartoony, and that's where you fell in that little valley.
Yeah, because I think you also had some characters who, like the conductors, who were more exaggerated and cartoony in terms of visual look and style and feel.
Oh, the Smokey and Steamer.
Yes, which honestly, when I first saw them, it really stood out because I'm like, man, up to this point, everyone's seemingly pretty normal, right? We're trying to fit more kind of human, standard human look and feel. But instead, like you have these much more exaggerated cartoony characters. And that added, I actually thought they looked better than the more trying to be, more photorealistic characters because you get to be exaggerated and stylized with them versus the photorealistic characters, which is where a lot of those things I think stood out more.
Yeah. It's kind of a shame that the author Van Allsburg put this limitation on them because he said, okay, well, you can adapt my book, but it can't be animated. So this was kind of the compromise that they came up with. Like, well, this isn't real animation. It'll be motion capture.
Hmm.
And maybe that satisfied some of the things that Zemeckis wanted to do with
Hmm.
his career. But you could, I think, very easily make the case. I would rather see this either be live action or completely animated like some kind of a Pixar film. And they weren't able to do the latter because of what the author had restricted
Hmm.
them. But what we got here, this mocap stuff, is very much of like a halfway house compromise.
Yeah, it just stands out so much with the human characters, right? So much of the rest of the environment,
Yeah.
even though it's animated, still just feels lush and inviting. But then you have to have people in front of it, in front of the screen.
Yeah. A couple things, though, I really appreciated is the stuff that Zemeckis did that you're not able to do with live action. Those long
Hmm.
shots, the shot of the ticket floating in the air with the wolves and the
Mhm.
eagle finally making its way back to the train. There's no score, not silence. You're hearing just the natural environment.
Yeah.
I think it's spectacular to watch. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a movie.
Yeah. We've talked before about the strength of being able to use the medium of animation versus live action. The cost of doing a stunt like the train drifting scene.
Oh, on the frozen lake?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that would be, I don't know how much money live action. I mean, this was $1 million a minute 20 years ago. So you're right, Anton. It's stuff that you see in this movie. Give the director credit. He was pushing the limits of what could be done with animation.
And let's be fair, that is totally Robert Zemeckis. I mean, think of pushing the boundaries with special effects with Back to the Future, the amazing work he did with Roger Rabbit. It's very
even
similar.
Forrest Gump.
Even Forrest Gump. Those were not real chocolates. Those were all computer generated.
I don't know if you knew this, but Gary Sinise really doesn't have legs.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wait, did I mix that up? He has legs. But I think about, the feather in Forrest Gump.
Yes.
That was the prototype for what he wanted to do here with the ticket, I think.
I could see that.
I can see that, for sure.
In the interest of time, Nathan, I'm going to plow
Let's
ahead
do it.
here. The second reason, which is lengthy, is the storytelling.
Yeah.
Look, I just want to say this again. I reiterated this in the beginning. This film is intended for young children. I am giving it a break based on that because I don't want to sit here and rag on a kid's movie too much. Watching this movie with kids was a lot of fun because, like I said, the kids loved it.
Look, I am a firm believer of a simple story that can be told effectively and well is also the backbone of a great movie. And I feel like in this case, the director didn't even have a lot of a story to build off of from the original source material. So it's already very ambitious to have to build some sort of a storyline that aligns with the vision for Robert Zemeckis. And I feel like it all has to fit in within, again, these themes that seem to continuously be pushed throughout the story. And I think it did so very effectively.
Well, here's the question, building off what you just said, Anton. If you include the illustrations, which often take up 2 pages, the book is 30 pages. What do you do with that if you want to make it into a film that's over an hour?
I think you need to take it as inspiration, as like a kind of either allow whatever's in that book to have like key points or key like moments you want to recreate. Like, I don't know a lot of the content of the book, but the hot chocolate serving is like a thing from the book, right? So it's hard to not want to hit everything that happens in the book and then have fun filling in the spaces in between, right? I mean, that's definitely an approach to do with it. Now, the question is, what do you fill those spaces with?
You don't. You have to make your own spaces because there aren't any spaces. Because all it says is the kids are served hot chocolate, and there's a picture of the servers dressed in white serving hot chocolate. That's it.
What I mean is,
and
like,
what did Zemeckis say? Dance number.
The next scene, right? Like, that's a scene, right? What's the next one after that? You get to fill in the space in between that, getting to the next page of the book or the next point in the story, right? So if you want to fill it in with like the train sliding on ice to have a fun action sequence because you leave a point where they are talking on the train and then they get to their destination, that's great. You can have fun and you can fill that in like I think they did, right? But what you do with that core book is you make all of the scenes or sequences anchor points. And maybe you need to toss out 1 or 2 because they're not quite fitting, but that's what I would do with a 30-page, largely picture book to adapt.
Yeah, so just to kind of jump off of that, when I think about some of the key messages of this film, it's belief, faith, and just when we think of those themes around the holidays and around Christmas. Now, take the hot chocolate scene. What does it go from a fantastical like scene about enjoying some hot chocolate on a magical train ride, but then also use it then as a tool to show characters thinking outside of themselves and as a plot device to move the theme forward of how do we think of others during the holidays, or even how do we think of others? When should we be more thoughtful? And it just, again, fits very cleanly into the same messages they're telling throughout the film and speaking into these core beliefs that are part of the main character and being shaped in the main character. So I think like that is just an example of, you know, what we were just talking about, Nathan.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely the space to fill in with the story, which then comes in, I think, an interesting discussion maybe on theme, which is what is the theme of this movie?
It is belief and faith, in my opinion.
I think that's on point. So this book I have, The
Mhm.
Making of, The Art of the Polar
Mhm.
Express, there's a quote from it that says, "Instead of first generating a screenplay to serve as the source, the book continued to provide the touchstone throughout production and a major redefining of how to make an animated film. The traditional separation of the pre-production phase of dreaming up the book, the look of characters and environments, and the post-production stage of final images became virtually one streamlined process."
Hmm.
I could see that.
Okay.
To both of your points, they're looking at the book, they're treating it as a blank slate. They're taking the themes and they're like, how can we expand on this? That's how we get the hobo, who is probably the greatest representation of the belief theme that you're touching on.
The gobo,
Yes.
the ghost hobo.
The hobo's not in the book.
No.
I was disappointed when you told me
Nathan,
that.
I know you have
actually.
some thoughts on the hobo, also played by Tom Hanks. Your thoughts?
I mean, I quite liked the character. I thought it was fun. Like, what is this? What is a guy who's like clearly not fitting with the rest of the look and feel that's here, right? He's clearly out of place. And I thought that was really, honestly, really intriguing. I don't know where it ultimately lands for me, but I thought it was very intriguing to have that character represented. Like, what's he doing on this train?
Oh, I like this. I didn't think you were going to say anything good about him.
Oh, I thought it was a super intriguing character, and I thought it was like really kind of quirky and fun, and I'm disappointed that it as a character wasn't more used.
Well, this deleted scene that I was referring to earlier, it has Smokey and Steamer, who, by the way, are characters that are not in the book either. They are explaining through a shadow puppet show that the hobo is, in fact, the ghost of a homeless person who was killed while riding on top of the train.
Okay.
But the conductor has never fallen off.
No, he's never fallen off.
That seems a little brutal.
He mentions being saved by what he describes as an angel, right? Which is the hobo, apparently.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's I'm glad they cut it out.
Yeah.
I am too.
I'm not sure I want that in the movie.
I think it's ambiguous enough that I agree with you, Nathan. Like, it's so out of left field that I kind of like it. Because do you remember the shot, the shot I was talking about earlier, where you see the ticket flying around? You get a real brief glimpse of the hobo, and it's real quick to miss. You're like, "Who's that guy under the
because
train?"
that's the first time you see him. I was like, "What the heck? There's a random guy under the train sleeping. What the heck is going on?" There's more depth to this Polar Express than I thought. I don't know if that really ends up in the film that we got really getting unpacked. I would say it doesn't, but it definitely was making me intrigued. And I thought his conversation with the main kid on top of the train, when he's got like his little like cooking thing where he's making like coffee or something and like pulls out skis out of nowhere. I just thought was like, oh, this is a fun, quirky character. This is the type of thing I want from this movie.
He behaves strangely for a ghost. It seems like the main character, who we haven't talked about yet, quote unquote hero boy, he can interact with him and drink his coffee and ride with him on skis, but he's also a ghost. It's a little odd.
Yeah, it's a little odd, and when I think of trying to expand on like limited source material, it serves a very interesting purpose. I think that it's to provide a shadow of a doubt for the character, but at the same time maybe almost a test of faith, in which case I think it's a really nice usage of the character, because it's a ghost hobo. It's a spirit within itself, almost even causing the main character to question their own faith about Santa.
He's on a train to the North Pole and he's still doubting his belief in Santa.
Well, there are miracles around us all every day, and people still question their faith.
This is true. I'm moving through the characters.
Not a lot.
Well, I mean, so Hero Boy, he doesn't have a name, but in the artwork book that I have, his name was going to be Chris after the author. The girl was going to be named Holly. They don't use names in the film. The only kid that gets a name is little tiny Tim, poor boy, Billy.
It makes sense why you don't have names in the film, kids can then just look at this as stand-ins for that could be me.
I get it. I was really hoping that the know-it-all kid with glasses would be devoured by wolves.
Yeah, except for that kid. No one wanted to be that kid.
No, I don't think anyone was hoping for him.
He's gonna throw her off the train.
But he's like, I feel like a relatable character, a relatable trope of the know-it-all.
He's a snitch. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. A lot of kids are. A lot of kids, they're just looking to get in good with the adults. I don't know.
It's true. Poor boy Billy. Why is he on the caboose like a tuberculosis patient in quarantine? Why doesn't he join the other kids?
Honestly, did they ever address that?
No. Nope.
What was that, Anton?
I was just saying, I don't think they ever addressed that.
No.
Nope, they don't.
Because he's the poor sad kid. That's why he's going to be separate from everyone else because he's poor and sad.
But he couldn't afford to sit in the nice car?
I guess.
That's what it was implying. Like, in like Titanic where they're in steerage.
And then the conductor's like, "Oh, you want to bring the hot chocolate to the sad kid? Let's do it."
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's like
Should we invite him up to this car? No, absolutely not.
No, that's
Yeah.
a little too far.
we're not going to do that.
Ridiculous.
We're going to go and we're going to give some hot chocolate to the poor, but I don't know if we'd really bring them up to our space and our location.
Yeah, let's try to cut. Let's try to break that down a little bit. What message are we trying to learn here?
I don't know.
The poor kid is the biggest one for me that I'm like, because he like tells people that like Santa doesn't come like to my home or something.
Yeah, he's like, oh, Christmas doesn't work out for me. It's like, what does that mean?
Well, it's also like, what does that mean? Has Santa not visited before? And if that's the case, then like, okay, it's great that Santa's visiting this time, but what's Santa been doing the previous times?
That's,
Yeah.
I think, the part of the film where they were trying to go outside of the book and they didn't even land anything they were flying.
Yeah.
It's like, so this film is obviously trying to ask some kind of deeper question
Mm-hmm.
that's not in the book, and they're not answering it. I have no idea what they were implying with poor boy Billy.
Yeah, I don't know if they're
Yeah,
trying to
it's
say like,
a big
yeah,
question
it can
mark.
seem like you can't believe because circumstances are hard, but if you just believe, like Santa will pull through, which is that's a theme.
Yeah, it's kind of a. It definitely seemed like more of a half-baked part of the plot.
And a lot
It's
of that,
stupid.
a lot of this movie felt half baked to me.
Anton, just call it what it is. It's stupid.
Yeah, it is. It is, isn't it?
You know what else is kind of stupid? How do we feel about this film being a pseudo musical?
Needs a bit more. It needs to commit. I think it actually would have been a fantastic full musical.
But it
Half
doesn't.
baked.
What was your least favorite song? The song that poor boy Billy is singing on the back of the train, accompanied by the girl who's supposed to be named Holly but isn't named. And then you get our hero boy who just watches them sing.
Probably that one. I
Yeah.
kind of like the hot chocolate
Kind of
song
cringy.
because you have like Tom Hanks doing a little thing. Plus, it's also over in like 15 seconds.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the 1990s Toyota commercials. Toyota's hot, hot, hot. Ole, ole. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're
Oh, yeah.
saying. Oh, that's funny.
And then we get the Steven Tyler song at the end, which is probably the creepiest part. There's a lot of ominous vibes in this film.
The
Roger
opening-
Ebert, in his review, said, quote, "It's a little creepy, not creepy in an unpleasant way, but in that sneaky, teasing way to let you know eerie things could happen. There's a deeper, shivery tone instead of the mindless jolliness of the usual Christmas movie," end quote.
Yes, I think so. And I think that that's not just the uncanny valley, though it's helped by that. I mean, that's when you have a ghost hobo who's a little like off, right?
Drunk.
Sure. Some one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. From the very beginning, I kind of got a feeling like there was an unsuredness and a bit of wonder to the beginning. And part of it is because it feels like it's almost like a dream coming to life. Is it a half dream?
Yeah.
Because it starts with him in bed, right? And it's with the conversation of the belief in Santa and kind of the questioning faith. So then throughout, it almost is like a roided out dream of his.
Well, and it
Roided
ends with
out.
him waking up and like repeating tearing his pocket and stuff like that. So it is implied to be a
Mhm.
dream of some sort.
And I feel like that actually is a bit, it's fun to have that whimsical aspect of questioning whether or not it really happened. But at the same time, then maybe some certain elements of it, like feeling like a nightmare, is actually more in line with, oh yeah, like this kid is kind of teeter-tottering between this being a nightmare and a dream.
That would have been a fun thing to have played into more. And you do get that, like, there's the sequence where he goes into the one train car and it's really like creepy.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh, with the marionettes and stuff.
yeah,
Super spooky.
Yeah.
yeah. So it is interesting that the film has this as an on-running thing, though. Again, like so many other things, just feels half like not finished, or like that was a fun idea we ran with for a little bit until we decided to move on to something else.
Going back to the book again, there are definitely parts of this movie that absolutely capture the vibe of the book. When the train first pulls up in front of his house and he goes outside and he's just staring at the train, it is like pure magic to me, because it perfectly captures what is in the book. The vibe of the book, the feel of the book, the magic that you can get from reading and looking at the book. And I have to give it credit for that. The dreamlike thing that both of you are talking about, I'm completely in agreement. Have either of you seen Return to Oz?
Yeah.
I've not.
This movie reminds me of the vibes that you get in Return to Oz. Anton, you've seen it, so you know what I mean.
A little creepy.
Yeah, it's a little creepy, but you're in a kid's movie, but you're not sure what's going to happen.
No, that's a really, really good comparison, because yeah, there's just something a little eerie about it. Even though it's a kid's Christmas film, it does feel a little off.
There's a build up to something and you're not really sure what it's going to be. So we've mentioned this a few times. The book is about 30 pages. The movie is about 90 minutes. I think where this film succeeds is they capture the look of the book very, very well. I mentioned Norman Rockwell before. This book always reminded me of Norman Rockwell paintings. This film, I think, captures the look of those illustrations and those paintings very well. Every single illustration in the book can be matched to a frame in this movie. I found that very satisfying. The boy crawling on his bed, the first shot of the train, the wolves, the corkscrew mountain, the train going around the spiral in the mountain, the bridge to the North Pole when he loses the bell. It nails all that stuff really, really well.
And again, I'll reiterate, as we talked about before, the visuals. I think visuals outside of people, like, really well done, right? And or anything that's like not close up on a face, just really very imaginative. I think, very iconic. I think your description of Norman Rockwell is like great. It's capturing that cozy classic Christmas feel, like the dense snow, the dense woodedness. It's not a city Christmas. It's like a woodsy Christmas.
Cozy's the word for it. Both of you have used it, and I completely agree. Like, I don't know how to pin it down any better than that, where like objectively this film does a lot of things that I don't think are great, but the fact that it has that coziness, I give it a lot of credit for that. One thing that I think works against the film, and I would imagine both of you agree with this, there are large chunks of this film where there's just no plot whatsoever. Like when Hero Boy accidentally unhitches the train car with him and the girl and Tiny Tim, whatever his name, Billy, and they were getting the train car rushing down in the empty North Pole, the creepy abandoned streets of the North Pole village, and they go to the train depot and they start stumbling around in the train depot, and then they're going into Santa's factory and all this stuff. Like, there's just no plot going on, and it's just padding the runtime. And if you like it, you like it, but if you're like us and you're trying to watch a film, you're like, what's going on here?
It feels very visual spectacle, and those were the points where I felt most like, I feel like this is being a fun movie for kids, and also a movie that I think you've highlighted a couple times, Pat, like IMAX and like seeing it in theaters. I felt like when I'm watching it on my TV, I'm like, man, this does feel like it was a film made to be in a theater.
Yeah, and that's part of maybe where Zemeckis and other filmmakers, there's someone in the room that needed to tell them, like, hey, Bob, this might look good in 3D, but is this really what you want to watch on TV like 100 times at home? It's like, I don't know.
He may not be thinking that, right?
Oh, I don't
No,
think he
no, and
is.
that may be also like, why? Who cares, right? I'm doing this for this. Yeah, I'd be super interested because I don't think it's a movie that. Because I think some of those quick action filler sequences, so to speak, probably hit different where you're watching them and how you're watching them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like I said, this film blew me away when I saw it in the theaters, but the stuff we were just talking about, it's kind of like watching a video game,
Yeah,
and I don't really think that's what I want from a
sure.
movie. I like video games and I like movies, but they don't always gel well together.
No, and can we at least agree that probably a big part of that is just the plot, the story is just not as seamless as we'd like it to be.
Yeah, I agree. There basically is no plot for just big parts of the
Mm,
movie.
yeah.
This is as loose as a plot has ever been, probably for any film we've ever covered, Anton. Like this is a really hard film to rate for me. I don't know about you, but like this was a challenge.
I think, I mean, that's, yeah, I agree it's a bit of a challenge because it uses certain things well, like the plot or using kind of key moments to move forward, like the importance of these different themes. But at the same time, I don't feel compelled by the
Hmm.
story. I don't feel an emotional attachment to the main character or to any of the characters, really.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
It's just
They don't
more,
even give
yeah.
them names.
No, but I think it's just more so this film went really hard on recreating these iconic moments from the source material that, with nothing against it, is look
Mm,
gorgeous, but ends up ringing almost hollow when trying to connect it to like a paper thin
yeah.
storyline. But the visual aesthetics are so strong that I think that that's what really has given it a ton of staying
Mm,
power.
What did we think of the score?
Very
yeah.
holiday,
Much
much
holiday.
holiday.
Okay, I can already tell I like it better than both of you. I thought the score was amazing. Like I said, I wish I had seen this with the orchestra.
Yeah.
This would have
I
been
think
great.
for me, I'm not a lot of it. I'd have to go back over and listen to it because I don't remember a lot of it standing out. Maybe that's because the kids' songs really are in my brain a lot more.
Yeah, the score is not officially available. You have to dig it up on like YouTube
Oh, really?
bootlegs. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know what the deal is.
Huh.
I think a large chunk of it, and let me know your thoughts, is I didn't grow up with this film. So things like the score don't really sit for me with the same connection to the holidays as maybe someone that did really enjoy this as a kid. And I feel like because I've seen so many other Christmas films that I have more of a strong fondness for, that elicits that feeling for me. Versus
It's
I saw
fair.
this once in college. I've seen it again, for the podcast. Yes, I think it matches the tone, but do I think that it completely stands out? No, I don't think it is much more of a greater of a Christmas score than, other films that I've seen.
Yeah. And based on your comment, Pat, I was looking it up. It's interesting that the soundtrack that was released for it is mainly just like known Christmas like standards, right?
Right.
That were used in the film rather than
Yeah.
the actual like music.
Alan Silvestri's score, there's only snippets of it on that
Mm,
soundtrack. He's a longtime collaborator with Robert
yeah.
Zemeckis. Marvel fans will know Alan Silvestri very well. He's been working for a long, long time.
Mm,
Well, Anton, you may have kind of hit the nail on the head with it, though. Like, you haven't gotten an opportunity to hear the score separately. It's not available. Might be part of it. It's probably
Mm.
not played a lot.
I mean, that one song, Believe by Josh Groban, it gets played during the
mm.
holidays like a ton.
I like that song. I know a lot of people don't.
If you just believe.
Right. And of course, this is the connection to the film that you previously covered with us,
Oh yeah.
Nathan. Troy.
Yeah. More Groban.
Josh
More
Groban.
Groban, the
Josh
synthetic.
Groban.
Yeah. Both of you forgot, but I didn't.
No,
You're welcome.
I knew it because it was the first thing my wife mentioned when we finished Troy. And I was like, okay, we have to watch Polar Express next. And she's like, oh, this is two Josh Groban songs. Thought that was funny.
No, I think in the same, so when I think of another Christmas film that it's top tier for me, I get pure nostalgia just thinking of watching this film and getting to watch this film every holiday is the Santa Claus. And I don't think that the music in that film is, light years beyond any other holiday film, but because it's that I watched that film as a kid, that the music sticks out, whether it's the Jingle Bell Rock in the beginning, any of the holiday songs that are in used throughout the film and through the score.
Well, that's
But
it.
yeah, but I feel like tied to this film, you add the coziness and the aesthetic of a Christmas train ride, and you have yourself a fantastic package to enjoy the holidays.
Well, you can take real train rides for this
Yeah,
if you want.
a lot of cities do offer a Polar Express.
Yeah.
I remember I saw a really sad ad for Polar Express experience, but it was actually just on a bus.
Mm, no, they just dress it up. Oh my gosh.
Welcome to the Polar Express, and it's just a double-decker bus.
Hot, hot, hot. And with us tonight is the corpse of Michael Jeter.
Hot chocolate's just going everywhere.
Just
cut that
spraying.
Nathan, in the interest of time, I know we have to
Yeah.
wrap up here. Do either of us have anything to add?
I think I got to make what I was interested in saying about the plot, and I think we all kind of are in agreement that that's a part that is rough, if we should say.
One thing we didn't really touch on that I think it's important to just mention, we talked about how polarizing this film is. I don't think that this film really deserves hate. I'm shocked to see like what could elicit such strong feelings, considering the film in itself is not offensive. Or at least I feel it's not a very offensive film.
I agree with you. I was really almost amused to learn about all the hate of this on the internet. I saw comments and like reviews saying like the Uncanny Valley stuff was so much that I find this film scary.
That's definitely an extreme take, especially in the modern, experience.
Yeah, like it's like this movie scares you. Okay.
I think that's probably from a weak individual.
It's just a very, very extreme thing to say, like you said, Nathan.
Yes.
As the guest, would you like to go first and give your rating?
Absolutely. Thank you, Pat. So, going into the Polar Express, I didn't know anything about the film. I had a general understanding that it was probably going to involve a train and it was going to be Christmas time. But beyond that, not too much other information. In terms of plot, that's probably about as much as I left the film with by the end of it. I say that jokingly because I want to really recognize that this is not a film for me. I think this, more than some other Christmas classics, I think is a film for kids, or at least some of what it was really storytelling wise was kind of putting in more for the spectacle and the visual, and a bit less about kind of consistency with theme or consistency of writing. Ultimately, I don't hate this movie. I agree with you guys. I don't see why people would hate this movie or think it's so terrible. But it's not a movie that I would say is now on my list of Christmas classics that I got to see regularly, or that is something, and certainly I don't have any nostalgia for it. With honestly, again, saying that this is a film that I really just don't think is for me, I still am going to give it a C-. It's not bad. It's not like, oh my gosh, this is not, this is like unwatchable, or oh my God, it's so bad. But it's not a movie that's exciting me or that I'm wanting to, tell others about or see again anytime soon.
I think that this film has a lot of merit in the use of a technology that at the time was still not leveraged in the same way so heavily. And so while there are some miscues, we do have to really applaud just how incredible it was to be able to see such vivid beauty on the screen when we do see recapturings from the novel. It's a very limited source material. And so at least being able to capture the aesthetic is just something so incredible that not all films can say they do. I don't think that Hollywood often looks at things with limited source material, and in that same sense, how do you kind of take that limited source material and elevate it a bit? In this case, it was capturing the spirit and trying to build, trying to build a plot around it. Miscues that are coming to mind of just very hollow films with limited source material are the film Battleship, the Angry Birds movie. It's where you have something where it's just, oh, this is a way to make money. Like, we just have to make a film about it. And at the end of the day, of course, the studio looks at this and says, we can probably make this a big success. But you put it in the hands of someone like Robert Zemeckis, who's just an incredible mind. We get a very, I think, well thought out, very visually strong film, which, despite its flaws from a storytelling perspective and some, yes, I think very very difficult animation within the uncanny valley, I think it has a lot of merit, and I really do stand upon what I said. I think this does fit on a Christmas classics list. Maybe if I'd grown up with it, it'd probably be on mine. But I think that with everything, I do think that this film sits at a C-. I'm right there with you, Nathan. It's not personally my cup of tea, but I am absolutely enamored with the coziness and its ability to kind of capture the holiday spirit.
I find this movie fascinating, even though I don't think it's good. Or should I say, I don't think it's great, because I don't think it's bad. It has flaws. I think the hate is overblown. We were just touching on it. Like, I agree that the animation, there are aspects of it that have not aged well. I understand what Zemeckis was going for. I respect him for making a huge swing, but this kind of early motion capture animation, it is a little dated. Some of the Uncanny Valley criticisms are valid, even though I don't think it bothered me as much as some others. I think if you're adapting what this book is, both of you already touched on it, there's not a whole lot to work with. So what you see in this film is a lot of padding. It is too long. It has some strange tonal shifts. There are periods of the film where there just doesn't really appear to be a plot. I mostly enjoy Tom Hanks' various performances in this, at least as far as being an outlier in his career. The source material, it's a Christmas favorite for me. And despite the flaws, I really do enjoy the rewatch of this. Anton, I'm just going to sing your praises on this. Cozy is the right word. This film gets that vibe right. And watching this recently with my family, with little kids, it was a treat. They ate it up. And the vibe that we all had watching it, I have to give the film props for that. I would love to see a live action version of this. Despite what Zemeckis said, it does not need to cost $1 billion. I think this is a very feasible live action film to do, especially with the advancements in CGI that they've made in the past 20 years. I'm all for a remake of this. I think this film stumbled so that others could run. That's how I think. I give this a C+. I just think it does such a wonderful job of capturing the feel and the look of the source material. And like I said, I'm biased because I read the book as a kid, but I think probably more highly of this film than others. But I give this a C+.
I think it's very fair. Well, it's, you know what? At the end of it, it's the not quite so polarizing Express.
Yeah, we're not that far apart. One last thing. We cover a lot of films on this podcast that you could watch kind of whenever. This is definitely a Christmas film that I can only watch around Christmas time. Some Christmas films you can watch whenever.
Yeah.
This is a film I watch around Christmas time every year. This is not something I'm popping on in June.
No, it's it has to fit the right vibe.
Yeah, I have to be drinking hot chocolate.
Yes.
In the same way that I can only watch Fatal Attraction in October.
Because when you're making rabbit stew.
God.
Nathan, where do you sit on Fatal
I've
Attraction?
never seen it. No.
Oh man,
No.
you're missing out.
Nathan, what have you seen at this point?
What haven't or what have I seen?
No, what have you seen?
Not much, apparently.
Yeah.
I watch. I've seen Polar Express.
It's worth a watch.
So that's
you seen La La
seen
Land?
It was good. Enjoyed it.
They need to make an OC version called Ok Land.
Or a Star Wars version called At Land.
There you go.
There you go. There's a deep
Like
cut.
it. That land.
All-terrain armored transport.
Transport.
poetry.
That's what it is. It's got the legs.
It
It's got
rhymes.
legs.
Hey, this thing's got legs.
Yeah.
Oh, they're falling.
Oh, dear. Detached cable. Okay. The ice planet
Hoth.
Hoth.
Hey, there. Can Opening of Empire be a Christmas movie?
Could be, yeah. Sure. Do they celebrate Christmas on Hoth?
It's not Christmas. It's Life Day or whatever. Is that what it is? What's it from the Christmas movie?
Yes, you're right. You know what the worst part about the holiday special is? It's canon. They've never retconned it, so it's canon. So you know all the wonderful parts of the EU that we all love? They got rid of that shit, but they kept the holiday special.
Yeah.
Mm,
Wait, they put it on Disney Plus? I don't know.
No. No.
they did not, but
No,
I
they
get
never will.
what
animated
Pat's
segment
saying.
that introduced Boba Fett was released on Disney Plus.
Right.
Yes, it was.
No, but Anton, like I'm not. This isn't hyperbole. Like they have not retconned it.
Versus they've completely retconned every novel.
Yes.
All right.
So that means Mark Hamill with his eyeliner and Carrie Fisher blitzed out of her mind in that holiday special. It's canon. Anyway, well, that's it for the Polar Express. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Nathan, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Did you indicate that you're interested in talking about Braveheart, or are you on the fence?
Let's chat. Let's chat.
Okay.
No,
That's a no.
I'm interested, but I don't. Let's chat scheduling. I'm interested. Let's chat what the scheduling looks like, because I don't know when you're planning it. And yeah.
If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a follow and a 5-star review. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel as well. You can always find us on Instagram, Twitter, aka X, and TikTok, aka TikTok. For those who would like to support us directly, we have a Patreon. Links are in the description for all of the above. Thanks for listening, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, y'all.